City ini aku berdiri, melangkah mula dan terus berlari, mengejar visi, menggenggam misi. Puncak megah ingin ku tawani, dengan ilmu aku berbakti, julang tradisi, unggulkan varsity. Ayu semangat di hati, dan terus berlari, mengejar visi, menggenggam misi. Puncak megah ingin ku tawani, dengan ilmu aku berbakti, julang tradisi, unggulkan varsity. Ayu semangat di hati, katakan ini, we love you PM, we love you PM. Kau sentiasa di hati, kaulah inspirasi. Ayo berlari, menggapai misi, berilmu berbakti. Oh yeah, we love you PM. sejati negara tercinta. Ramai desa di pelbagai kota, tersebar citramu semoga berkala. Di darjat bangsa, di daulat negara, tersurat jasamu bencana kemajuan.
Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar Towards Inclusive Education. This webinar is one of the interesting webinars proudly presented to you by the Center for Academic Development, University Putra Malaysia, in conjunction with the 4th International Putra Innovative Carnivals in Teachings and Learnings. It is my pleasure to be the moderator. I'm Chong Chao Min. On behalf of UPM, we'd like to thank and extend our warm welcome to all of you, the audience of YouTube and Facebook. Before we get started, I would like to remind you that you may leave your questions at the chat sessions. You may send in your questions at any times during the webinars. We will correct these questions, and if the times allow, we will address them accordingly. We'll turn the times over to the presentations. We are privileged to introduce you our respected guest speaker today, Associate Professor Dr. Wan Zuhainis Saad. Dr. Wan Zuhainis is an associate professor in microbiology. She's a strong advocate of empowering learners in experiential learning and practices technology-enhanced learning. She's the winner of National Academic Awards, Teaching Awards Pure Science Cluster 2018. She's currently as the Director of Academic Excellence Divisions, Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Higher Education Malaysia. She oversees the strategies, academic planning and policy developments, innovations, scholarships of teaching and learning, and talent excellence. Let's hear from her on the subjects towards inclusive education. So Dr. Wan, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chong. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Very good morning to all joining us today in Facebook and YouTube. First of all, I would like to thank CADe, University Putra Malaysia, for having me this morning. Congratulations on the PicTL International this year, virtually. So I'll be sharing with you today on the topic that was given to me towards inclusive education. I'll be sharing my screen now.
While waiting for Dr. Wan to share the screens, so please like us on Facebook and YouTube. Okay, Dr. Wan, we can see your screen nicely.
Can okay.
Yes.
So I just put it in
Full screen.
presentation mode. Yeah. Can you see now?
Yes, very nice.
All right. Thank you so much. So the topic is actually on towards inclusive education. So when I was given this topic, I would think that, when we say towards inclusive education, in Malaysia, for example, we will want to know where are we right now, and what is actually inclusivity in education. According to UNESCO, inclusive education is seen as a process of addressing and responding to the diversity of needs of all learners through increasing participation in learning, cultures, and communities, and reducing exclusion from education and from within education. So, for this topic, we will be discussing, I'll be sharing on the context of higher education in Malaysia. And it is also very important that we emphasize on how inclusive education is about actually ensuring access to quality education for all students by effectively meeting their diverse needs in a way that is responsive, accepting and respectful and supportive. Students participate in the education program in a common learning environment. So there are also publications and studies on how the students how the educators designing the common learning environment for the students that actually support the inclusivity in education. and that will actually remove barriers and obstacles that actually may lead to exclusion. So our aim is to ensure that our whole education system will facilitate learning in the suitable or conducive learning environment, where the educators and learners embrace and welcome the challenge and benefits of diversity. Now, within the inclusive education approach, learning environment are actually fostered by where individual needs are met and every student has an opportunity to succeed. That's where the Learning for All, published by UNESCO, is actually a guidelines on the inclusion of learners with disabilities in open and distance learning that was published, and within that guidelines, it mentioned also under the Article 21, freedom of expression and opinion and access to information. Okay, so these are some of the international, what we call as international commitments, especially through UNESCO and through Sustainable Development Goals under the SDG for quality education, and also to reduce inequalities. This is under the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, that is to empower persons with disabilities. Now, under the in the international commitment in level also, where Incheon strategy to make the right real for persons with disabilities in Asia and the Pacific, and one of the under the goal 3, enhance access to the physical environment, knowledge, information, and communication. And also under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and optional protocol. So in Malaysia, under the Malaysia Education Blueprint, Higher Education 2015, 2025, okay, and systems aspirations, access, quality, equity, unity, efficiency. Those are the system aspiration that was crafted and designed under the Malaysia Education Blueprint that emphasize on how our education should be able to provide access to the quality education, despite the and to embrace the diversity that we have, especially in Malaysia. And through students' aspirations, ethics and spirituality, leadership skill, we always emphasize on akhlak, how we balance between akhlak and also ilmu, which is the ethics and morality and knowledge and skills. So this is actually the that is can publish under the Malaysia Education Blueprint, Higher Education 2015-2025. And under the laws of Malaysia's Akta Orang Kurang Upaya 2008, the Persons with Disability Act 2008 also, the Act 65, this act actually provide for the registration, protection, rehabilitation, development and well-being of persons with disabilities. The establishment of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities and for matters disconnected therewith. That is under the Act 685. And in September 2019, a guideline on the implementation of disability inclusion policy in institution higher learning also was launched and published in 2019. At this moment, the Ministry of Education is developing a what they call as Plan Pembangunan Pendidikan Inklusif untuk orang kurang upaya. That is under the Ministry of Education, actually a plan for inclusive education for people with disabilities. That is actually still under work in progress. Now, we do know that when we talk about when inclusive education is carried out in a common learning environment, that is where the educational setting where students from different backgrounds and with different abilities learn together, right, in an inclusive environment. So usually the common learning environment is not actually a place where students with intellectual disability or other special needs learn in isolation from their peers. The teaching and learning process is an inherently social act. So as instructors, we need to be mindful of the quality of the social and the emotional dynamics in our class, our topics, because they actually impact learning and performance. So in fact, there are research who documented the effects of what they call as a chilly classroom climate on some students of groups of students, in particular women and other minorities, that were published in 1982. And when we talk about inclusiveness for persons with disabilities, there are basically barriers, okay, to this inclusiveness. One of it is what we call the physical barriers, which is related to the inaccessible to the built environment. Informational barriers relate to the information, particularly on the for those with hearing impaired and visual impaired. Attitudinal barriers relate to insensitivity, lack of empathy towards people or person with disabilities, and then relate to inflexible procedures and policies, that is on what we call the systemic barriers. Right. Now, so the accessibility, when we talk to accessibilities, also include some of these examples. Vision, for example, vision, hearing, mobility, that is the physical barrier, cognitive and learning itself. Now, when all these disabilities, for example, like vision and low vision or blind, colorblind, they are being facilitated, will usually being facilitated with what we call the assistive technology. Assistive technology and screen readers, for example, with braille display, high contrast settings or magnifiers. Maybe I would like to share with you when I was in I think in Form 1 or Form 2 secondary school. I used to go to volunteer to read for those in the special needs school, for those who are those are blind or they have impaired vision or low vision. So those are some of the approaches that or method that they use to ensure that these persons with disabilities to have access to the learning materials. Now, accessible education material, for example, usually are with the, for example, for vision and hearing impact, right? From the National Center on Accessible Education Materials, the accessible education material are actually print or and technology-based education material that include the printed or the e-book. Okay, and it always designed or published in a way that the material would be able to be used and accessed to a wider range of students, regardless of the formats. So, for example, those with vision impact, they need, for example, a larger print of the font size, for example, or a very highly contrast background. So all the guidelines for the instructional materials or educational materials also can be accessed through these websites, and also link that are being shared in UNESCO's websites. Now, assistive technologies are actually products or software or hardware that facilitate, okay, the person with disabilities, in order for them to be able to access to the materials. For example, as I mentioned just now, on the screen readers, or even a special keyboard or trackball mouse. All these are actually what we call the assistive technology. Now, why is it digital accessibility is very important? Okay, so when we discuss on inclusive education, because of this pandemic, this unprecedented situation where everybody goes online, and the rapid transition from face-to-face to online learning has impacted especially people with disabilities, especially in education. And digital access that was actually emphasized during the pandemic is here to stay. And the content that is developed through what we call the digital content, in any form, should be able to access by everybody, including people with disabilities. And there are, besides having the content to be uploaded, even when we have the digital content prepared, right? We need to ensure that all the content, okay, that is to be shared to all are being able to access. For example, if you actually prepare your videos, okay, and you upload in your learning management system, or your or in the YouTube, for example, and for those who hearing impact, they may need to have the captions, okay, the captions or the subtitles to for them to able to understand, okay, or to get access to the material through the video that you have recorded. So all these actually should take into consideration when we prepare our learning materials for our students, especially in with all the advanced technology that we have right now. We want to we need to be able to leverage on the technology using the software and devices that can facilitate the development of the learning materials, right? And the UNESCO also will publish a document called the Model Policy for Inclusive ICTs in Education for Persons with Disabilities. So the focus is to use ICT to support implementation of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability that was in 2006, specifically focusing on 3 articles. Article 9 on accessibility, 21 on freedom of expression and opinion and access to information, and Article 24, inclusive education. So this will actually include, you know, all students, regardless of any challenges they may have, or even place in age-appropriate general education classes, and they are in their own learning environment just now. And this will actually provide inclusive learning opportunities at all possible stage or possible stages of their education, be it from the early childhood of education, basic education, post-compulsory schools education, or until the tertiary and higher education. And of course, this when we talk about inclusive education, we would also want to emphasize on the adult education and further the lifelong learning opportunities. Now, in this document, it's also emphasized on the access to appropriate and appropriate and more what we call flexible or inclusive ICTs that actually support a flexible, personalized learning approach, incorporating support for the developing self-accommodation in the use of the ICT. So I think this is actually a very good policy when emphasizing on the use of ICTs in education for persons with disabilities. Now, I would like to share with you on how inclusive, how open educational resources can contribute to the inclusive education. I'm sure that everybody here joining us today is aware on is aware on OER, what we call as OER. It is actually content, any type of content, any form, any format of content that are being shared to the public. Okay, you can access open educational resources or OER in the websites of any institution or organization that produce the OER, and OER is being shared with no cost and allowed. Some of the OER are being allowed to material to be reused or modified and distributed. And it has most of the OER are in the public domain, or it is under the Creative Commons license. Now, we have, for example, the OER or in the form of open courseware, for example, in UTM, UITM, MIT Open Courseware, for example, and you can see lots of the OER under the Open Education Consortium, and also through Harvard University's have started sharing courses as an OER. In Malaysia, OER in public universities. We have about over 443 over 400 courses, and nearly 4,000 courses are being shared through in the form of graphics, animation, audio or video. And even in 2017, UNESCO, Commonwealth of Learning had worked together with USIM, to produce this, what we call the Towards National Policy Guidelines on OER in Malaysia. Now, when we the OER has been also internationally, it's like a movement actually, when in started in 2016. And during the Second World Open Educational Resources Congress in Ljubljana, Slovenia in 2017, with the theme OER for Inclusive and Equitable Quality Education, from commitment to action, that actually they have more than 500 participants at that time. And we were, in Malaysia, we were represented by Professor Fong from UMS, who actually our consultant for UNESCO. And this actually support the OER. They came up with the OER resolution, and how Malaysia has to commit. Malaysia also has their commitment to facilitate the OER, to ensure the inclusivity and the equitable quality education. And on the 25th November 2019, in the 40th General Conference of UNESCO, also has adopted what they call the UNESCO OER recommendation, okay, which actually give a huge impact to online learning, especially under the recommendations on OER UNESCO. One is building the capacity of stakeholders to create, access, reuse, adapt, and redistribute OER. This recommendation is actually under the OER 2019, the conference, UNESCO General Conference. So this recommendation call the member states of the UNESCO to take action under these 5 areas. One is on the building capacity of the stakeholders. The other, number 2, is on the developing supportive policy for OER, and then encouraging inclusive and equitable quality OER, nurturing the creation of sustainability models for OER, and promoting and reinforcing international cooperation in OER. So these recommendation, OER recommendation 2019, that support the mainstreaming of OER, that to assist all 193 member states in the inclusive knowledge society with the long-term objectives in achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal, right? So all the member states, they must endeavor to bring the OER recommendation 2019 to the attention of the authorities responsible for learning, education and research. In the case of Malaysia, the relevant ministries, departments of education, Ministry of Higher Education especially, that will need to consult with the relevant stakeholders concerning learning and also education, especially on the OER. So this recommendation highlight the need, okay, highlight the need for incorporation of the recommendation in the draft of the policy that we want to introduce, which is actually IOER, as one of the critical components which can serve to drive the national agenda on OER, of course in the current global direction, and to ensure that Malaysia remains on par with other member states. So when we work on this, on the recommendation of the OER recommendation 2019 by UNESCO, so Malaysia has proposed the national IOER policy, which is actually a general policy that serves as a guideline for an institution to develop OER that include individuals with disabilities to gain access for teaching and learning materials. Now, we started off with the higher learning institution first at that time, 2019. When this was tabled out to the Ministry of Higher Education, we were asked to review, okay, to review the stakeholders, especially when we talk about national inclusive open educational resources. That means it should be from school until the tertiary and higher education. So now the content is actually the scope of the policy of the national IOER policy, have included, okay, has included the all levels of education, including from childhood, early childhood until the higher education. So this will actually provide opportunity for all learners and educators to contribute and participate in the creation, revision or reuse and or remixing of the IOER. Now, the National IOER Policy Objective 1 to establish IOER governance and institutionalization at national and institutional level. Now, we are in the midst of getting the endorsement from the our minister in order for us to implement this national IOER policy, but it is also very important that the institution will to start to develop the awareness. Even without this IOER policy, it has been actually earlier emphasized on how the individuals or persons with disabilities, the important for them to get access to the learning materials because of all the barriers just now. So this national IOER policy would be able to facilitate, as mentioned earlier, as a guideline for the institution to formulate necessary strategic direction to craft or to establish the guidelines, and also to plan on how to adopt and to adapt and integrate the IOER in the educational content. And at the same time, it is also important to build the competent instructors to utilize and optimize IOER appropriately in their professional engagement, right, through CPD. And it is also we do want to emphasize on establishing relevant documentation and support system to design and develop and utilize and monitor on the development of this IOER in the institution, because although when we say that, you know, when we provide or when we develop OER itself, okay, in the institution, we need to ensure that the materials are being able to uh, uh, give access to the persons with disabilities. But I think the question that in terms of the implementation on how to, okay, the question is how to. So it is also very important that we want to promote collaboration among the stakeholders. Now, in the context of higher education, we are very clear that we want to the needs to produce the material, the learning materials or teaching and learning materials for our students. But for other agencies, other organizations, other ministries, the public, right? They need to be aware on how other materials, even for example, right now the SOPs or uh, any announcement material posters that are being produced from other ministries need to be able to be accessed by people with disabilities. So all those are the challenges, but at the same time we need to promote and create the awareness amongst the public, and make or integrate that change based on the development of the new IOER. Now, and this can be done, okay, through building capacity. Okay, when we talk about inclusive education, we need to create that awareness. We need to develop that skills and also competency amongst our instructors, because we want to ensure that the materials are in the to ensure that the materials are in the quality, to the quality of the material, especially the quality of the IOR, and at the same time work collaboratively with other stakeholders, especially in the abroad, international cooperation. And even right now, the approach that have been used, what we call as the universal design for learning. I'm sure that I think our moderator, today, Dr. Chong is one of the experts in UDL or universal design for learning, which is actually a framework to guide, as a guide for educational practice that provide flexibility in the way of information is presented. Okay, so in the ways of learners are respond to demonstrate knowledge and skill, and in the ways of learners are engaged. So this will actually reduce barriers in instruction, and also provide appropriate supports and maintain the high achievement expectation for all learners, including the learners with disabilities. And not only that, there are also learners that have what we call have a limited language proficiency. So when we actually able to incorporate UDL, just now universal design learning, in OER for learners with disabilities, that is now can be referred as part of the IOER. This will actually provide the opportunities for the learners to, especially those with disability, especially those with vision and hearing impact, to access, to participate, and also progress in general education curriculum by providing either multiple means of engagement and or multiple means of representation and multiple means of action and expression according to the UDL guidelines, right? So Malaysia actually aspires to improve access by making available higher education to relevant populations and ensuring quality and equity regardless of ability, geography, age, gender, or socioeconomic background. And so and how to enable rights of being an integral part of the learning community is one of it is through this IOER, which is actually accessible contents, assistive devices and ICT tools just now, education related facilities, skill human resources, and of course financial supports. I also would like to share with you the framework of the experiential learning and competency-based education landscape that was recently launched by the Ministry of Higher Education. That is that was on the 15th of October. That involve the elements of industry, research, community, and personalized. Now, in this framework, I would like to ensure you that although the framework is for is the foundation, the foundation for designing a curriculum. Inclusivity, equity, diversity are all has been considered in when we actually design this Excel framework, right? And under the 10 generic 10 C's skills, for example, cross-cultural and global learning skill, career learning, self-reliance, coping and well-being skills, for example, are amongst the skills that are being emphasized. And all these actions in are all our aim, okay, our goals are to reduce skill gap, okay, to reduce skill mismatch. We want to make change, okay, in the society that give impact to the social economy, and also to provide flexibility and choice, and of course what we call as nation prosperity. So we need each and everybody to be able to reimagineering our education, and we hope that we don't take our future education for granted, because the COVID-19 certainly shows us that we cannot do that. And by imagineering our alternative futures for our education, we can better think through the outcomes, develop what we call the resilience and change ready talents, and of course those are all our response to our plan and our for our future generations. Okay, so with that, I would like to thank you, and I'll stop sharing now. Thank you for your kind attention. Over to you, Dr. Chong.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Zuhainis, for your insightful talks. We would like to set the ball rolling with the question and answer. So I think we have questions from YouTube. So the first question is from Dr. Manraj, UPM. He says, thanks Thanks so much, Dr. Wans. My question is, how may we, as a current academicians, be prepared to be more inclusive in our teachings? And is there any needs for reskilling or upskilling?
Thank you, Dr. Manraj. Yes, definitely. We, I think, even with the current even without when we talk about upskilling, reskilling, okay, so it is supposed to be an ongoing process. I do believe, in this 21st century, with all the advancements of technology and all the generation gaps and the industrial revolution 4.0 and all, reskilling, upskilling is a must. But for upskilling, reskilling, to ensure that we are as educators providing the suitable um, uh, opportunity for those people with disability to learn or to unlearn and relearn is very important, because we want to ensure that although we provide the access, the we provide the access to the learning materials, but we want to ensure that the learning materials are at par and it is suitable according to the uh, diversity of the learners with disabilities. So, um, although we have all the guidelines by UNESCO and other bodies, even UNICEF, OECD, World Economic Forum also provide guidelines on this inclusivity. But I think it is also very important that our educators to have that specific upskilling, reskilling for this, and also at the same time practice it. Practice it and sharing those sharing of best practices also very important, and learn from others.
Yeah. Just like what Peter doing now, we are actually sharing the best practices of all the
Yes,
educators.
picture, exactly.
I think uh, this year, I think we have numbers of UDL related submissions, so can maybe pay a visit to our Peter showcase. And I believe each IPT, as what Dr. Wan mentioned, is a movement. Each
Yeah.
IPT already have their own initiative to make the education more inclusive. For example,
Mhm.
UPM, we have a task force for inclusive campus or KU. So
Okay.
soon we'll launch like trainings, awareness, and so on.
Okay. That's great.
And Dr. Wans, I think we are the Malaysia are the first team to coin this IOER, right?
Yes,
During
yes.
our yes,
Yes, thank you
yeah,
for reminding that. I would like also to share with you that this is Malaysia, exactly the first country to introduce IOER, and we hope that we are looking forward to launch this very soon, and to be adopted not only in Malaysia but the whole world.
mm, yeah.
Mm.
Okay, there's another question also from Dr. Manraj. He's asking about how smooth will the transition be, especially for the student of special needs. The transition he referring to is the transition from segregated education to inclusive
Mhm.
education. How smooth the transitions be?
Okay, so the I think it's also very important to emphasize on the change management. The change management is very important when we talk about the transition, and building capacity just now also, as Dr. Manraj also has mentioned on how should the educators, how should the leaders, the institutional management respond to this inclusive education. How could we revise the training programs, for example? How do we create awareness? Just now, Dr. Chong mentioned, for example, in UPM, you have your task force of inclusivity that can help to create this, come up with the guideline or module to create that awareness, or to encourage the use and create and share the materials. How to innovate, that is also very important. The transition also depends on how we are being innovative and creative in designing our pedagogical approach. And it is also very important to highlight here, how can we work with others. It needs a concerted effort, okay, to implement this. And we need also to show how this inclusivity is, that give impact, that give impact. Maybe also um, sharing with the communities, okay, sharing with the communities. And also just now when we say, when we talk about practitioners, so the establishment of, and the strengthen, to strengthen the governance to implement this inclusive education is very important, to support accessibility, to support learners diversity, and also to ensure that, you know, these are being enforced, um, and keep on progressing and innovate.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we do not have any questions from Facebook, also YouTube. I think we come to the end of the webinar. On behalf of Center for Academic Development, we'd like to extend our sincere gratitude and our appreciations to our respected speakers, Associate Professor Dr. Zuhainis. She spent her, I think, lunchtime, despite her packed schedules, for these insightful talks, sharing with us. And we also like to thank everyone for joining us today, whether you're from Facebook or via YouTube. And please remember to like and follow us, our Facebook page and our YouTube channels. We will have another webinar this afternoon, 2:30, and we are looking forward to seeing you in the afternoon sessions as well as our near future events. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Wan.
Thank you, Dr. Chong. Nice to see you here again.
Nice to see you. Long time no see.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Stay safe.